Human beings aren't necessarily social animals, and there's a strong argument to suggest that it's social settings that we live within that are defining our current predisposition towards being social in the first place. It seems a bit like asking what comes first. Is it the chicken or the egg? The logic is actually much more simple and does not require that we attempt to answer the question without first having the required information. In the chicken or the egg question, we need to know where the egg came from. Was it a chicken? And if it was, then maybe that's not the egg we're looking for to assess. I'm pretty sure the question was more pertaining to the notion of what created the chicken. Without having that knowledge about where the egg came from, we cannot answer the question of chicken or egg. But because we humans live within a society, a social environment where our inputs and our behaviors are marginally dominated by what exists in a physical and intellectual kind of arena, we have access to significant amounts of information to help us answer this question. Is it society or is it humanity? So let's play with this. The whole reason why we're even asking or questioning this notion of social human condition, or however you want to reference it, it's because on face value, the idea of being social is a positive thing. We talk about having positive interpersonal lives, positive community connections in order to have positive personal growth. Unfortunately, there are many examples from many walks of life and where society and social entanglement have proven to be more oppressive than uplifting, more of a game of political leveraging and winning than of social cohesion. And if these negative attributes exist, this idea that we're both somehow highly dependent on each other yet do each other ill will, it identifies that our relationship with our social selves has a significant dark side. And to say that there is a dark side is to say that there is a side of light. However, it's also demanding that we acknowledge that there are bad actors and there are good actors. We can also look at society and see how it has managed itself over thousands of years of human civilization and at a slow evolution to this day and age and realize how quickly the word social and society has changed. Its shape has changed multiple times, hundreds of countless of times over different cultures and timelines. What we begin to realize then, after close inspection, is the very nature of the idea of society. To say that we are social creatures is something that is mostly socially constructed. That is, our very definition of society and social relationships depends on the state of our society at a given time, and the people with the voices necessary to speak to the authority at that given time. You see how this picture is suddenly getting very complicated? Again, to say, I don't know, that something is socially constructed is to identify that meaning is often subjective. In fact, the person who says to you, people are social creatures, well, before you can really understand what that person is saying to you, you're going to need to know their personal perspective on what it means to be social. The statement of humans being social creatures is used differently. It has many users, many different functions. It can mean that we're positive, bonding, family-oriented, and community-centric people. Someone could also mean that people are political, interpersonally entwined, argumentative, biased, or whatever word that exists as a descriptive qualifier for a social behavior. They can also be acting simply on the notion of sarcasm, right? People are social and social beings, but I prefer to be antisocial, says the super fun guy at the party. And there are people like that where they go, yeah, people are social, but I'm antisocial. What does it mean to be antisocial? If you are inherently a social creature, how can you state that I'm antisocial? He was at a party, so maybe we question the ethos of that gentleman, but there are folks among us who don't find social connectivity to be beneficial at all. But let's talk about that question of benefits. In fact, let's ask this question: who benefits from social connectivity and being social creatures the most in society? Who benefits? Some people are shy, some people are conservative, some are outgoing, engaged, others are kind of mixed in their presentation. They can't be well defined and put into a box, and that's kind of to be celebrated. But as we try to put this question of whether or not humans are actually social creatures in its own neat little box so we can measure it, we must drive home the notion that social settings don't work for all people. In fact, let's ask this question again: who benefits most from society and social relationships? One would argue that we all benefit sort of, kind of equally from society, but that would be a very basic assessment, right? Super basic. Clearly, by doing just super quick cross comparisons of socioeconomic statuses, education level, comparing each other's cars that we drive, the homes and what neighborhoods we live, we quickly see divides in just very basic ways we can assess society. Maybe we just have to define it flat out. But here's the kicker: the demand is to have a definitive answer, but it's not feasible. Remember, this idea of the social human itself is socially constructed. A body of some bodies decided that the human creature is social, firstly, and the most obvious reason, because planet Earth requires a team effort. We can't build towns, cities, countries, healthcare infrastructure, etc. without having many hands in order to do the building. But if we didn't have many hands, maybe we wouldn't have to build these cities, right? That's an easy counter argument, countries and all that fun stuff. But if we didn't have many hands, we wouldn't have to build this thing called society. But we would still have to build something. And would probably be in like some kind of family cave or some independent hut with a few humans being interdependent on one another at the very least. Does that dependence actually define the word social? Because honestly, it sounds more accurate to suggest that we are physically dependent on one another rather than suggest we are socially or spiritually dependent. Our social dependence is actually a byproduct of being physically dependent on each other in this rough world called planet Earth, right? Like, we all have to live in this hut together to stay warm and dry, hunt and gather together to stay fed, and once our material needs are met through physical dependence that's brought upon us due to this limited living environment, we begin to socialize. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So, if you're familiar with it, at the bottom we meet our basic needs, and then things like emotional needs and love and other items kind of filter in once we've hit shelter and food and those kind of basic creature comforts. So with this in mind, wouldn't it be more accurate to say that human beings are survivalists by nature and social as a secondary characteristic? It's not literature and music or a drive for education or political debate that brought the early humans together and maintained those societies. If they weren't working together to meet basic needs, the whole principle of early civilization would have been defeated. And if we look at current society, wouldn't you say that, would you even say that things would go anywhere if folks just dropped their responsibilities? If we weren't working together right now to meet each other's basic needs through our jobs and maintaining infrastructure, would it be literature and music that drove us back together? When we look at current society, would you say things would go swimmingly if everyone stopped doing the physical stuff? If they left their social responsibilities as an aggregate effort over society, would society continue to function? Would our desire for the secondary characteristic of social humans, whatever that is, I guess, be overreaching? Would it be something that superseded that physical motivator that brought us together in that cave? Would we care? Or would we be hungry? Would we be warlike? Are we social creatures? Or are we survivalists?